Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be starting a new sewing project, and I thought it would be fun to share that with you. I have mentioned in one of my prior videos that I was considering doing this, and I was a little bit hesitant, and I got some encouragement from you guys in the comments to just go ahead and do it. So I'm going to be sewing the Vogue and Rachel Comey V1799 dress. This dress has a really interesting construction, and I can show you, I'll put a picture up of what I'm talking about, but the front and back pieces are quite narrow and the sides are gathered. And so the overall silhouette is one that is oversized. It has almost like a t-shirt dress, but elevated sort of feel. It has a V-neck both on the front and the back. And I think it's going to be perfect for the warmer spring and summer days. I'm really interested in making longer skirts and dresses, so they're still breezy, but you have a little bit more coverage, and I really like the design of this particular dress. I will say that there have been some kind of mixed opinions about this pattern as far as pattern reviews that I could find. Not a ton, but I've found a few. A lot of people say that it's really oversized, and the majority of people that I have found that have shared images and reviews of them having made it recommended sizing down, so that's what I'm going to do. I actually just I traced and cut out my pattern pieces, so I didn't cut into the kind of tissue paper of the pattern itself. I laid everything flat, put my own tracing paper on top, and then traced and cut out the pattern pieces for the size that I'm going to be making. Simply because stores like, Joann aren't around anymore. I want to take care of the paper patterns that I do have in case anyone else ever wants to make them in the future. So I did trace and cut the size small, and I believe the body measurements for myself are actually in the size medium, but I'm listening to the reviews that I've read and I'm sizing down. So the range for this particular pattern is extra small through XXL, and extra small is 4-6, small is 8-10, medium 10-12, etc. So my body measurements fall into the medium, but I'm going to cut the small. And I do think there's a generous amount of ease built into the pattern. So I think it's going to be all right as far as, I think it's still going to have a relaxed fit from sizing down. I just don't want it to be so large, which is something that I read about, where the V-neck in the front and back sits quite wide, and I don't want it to fall off of my shoulders or be something that I constantly have to adjust. So I'm hoping that by sizing down I can avoid that. Also, this pattern comes with side seam pockets, pockets that go into the inseam of the side seam, if that makes sense. And they're those little kidney bean shaped pockets that tend to flap around if not secured in a waistband above. And again, I can show you a picture. I'll put an image here of what I'm talking about, but I really don't like putting pockets in that are not secured to the seam above it. So if there's a side seam pocket, I prefer if it's rectangular so that it's also attached at typically the waistband above, so that it's not flapping around. If it's only on the side seam, it can go to the front of your leg, it can go behind your leg, and it's just really fiddly and annoying. Also, probably unpopular opinion, but I don't really like pockets on dresses that are of a lighter weight material. I find that if you put anything of any sort of weight, like your phone or whatever, into those pockets, it can kind of drag the weight of the dress in a way that I just find to be uncomfortable. I think if I'm going to be wearing a dress, I'm probably also going to be carrying a bag with me, so I'm not going to include the little kidney bean shaped pockets that go in the side seams, but other than that, I'm going to just cut it out exactly as is. The fabric that I'm going to be using is right here. It's a Oxford cotton. I forget the ounce weight. If I can find that, I'll put it on the screen. But the color is a really pretty off-white. I think they called it stone. And I think the camera's picking it up pretty accurately. It's like a neutral, but what I like about it is it's not a warm leaning neutral. The lights down here, I'm in the basement where my sewing machines are. The lights here are very yellow, so I can also try to take a shot upstairs in natural light and show you the fabric. It is a neutral that is cool leaning, not yellowy and warm leaning, despite what you might see here. And part of my hesitation about jumping into this dressmaking project was the fabric color, because I am quite fair-skinned and I didn't know that with like an oversized silhouette with a lighter tone neutral, if it would just completely wash me out and kind of overtake me. But some of you gave me some really good feedback in the comments of a video where I was kind of contemplating this. I already have the fabric. I have quite a bit of it. I got it on like a 60% off clearance. It's 100% cotton. And just using this fabric to go ahead and make the dress will give me an idea of the fit of the dress. It can be functionally like a toile or a muslin, but also I'm going to do all of the finishing to make it wearable. And if I end up not liking the color or the fit perfectly, this can just be something that I wear around the house, which I love wearing big, loose, oversized clothing around the house. So I'm gonna go ahead and make it. If it works out well and the color and the fit and everything work out well, I do really like the color and the fabric composition. So I'm hopeful. I'm gonna go ahead and do it with this fabric. And also, if I enjoy the end result of this one, I think I would be more confident going forward to invest in like a nice cotton poplin or a linen fabric that might be a little bit more expensive in a color or a pattern that I like, and I could make this again. I think using this fabric that to me was quite inexpensive that I already have is a good way to just get started with a project that I've kind of been umming and ahhing about because I was hesitant about the color. I do like the color. I just don't know if it's going to be successful in a long oversized dress. So all of that to say, I've got my pattern pieces cut out on the tissue paper roll that I use for that. I have the fabric. I do need to give this another press and then lay it out and cut everything out. And then I'm not going to do a step-by-step tutorial of sewing this dress, but I do want to check in with you as I go and kind of tell you how it's working out, and I'll show you, try it on as I can, and if I need to make any adjustments, I will share those with you too. So yeah, hopefully this will be interesting. If you have considered making this pattern, hopefully this will be an informative video for you. And if you're just hanging out and knitting or something and I'm keeping you company, then that's awesome as well. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut my fabric. Today is Monday, and I got a chance to work on the dress a bit over the weekend, and I would say I'm probably about midway through, and so I thought it would be a good time to check in with you and kind of tell you how it's been going. I've come upstairs, a little bit of foreshadowing, I suppose. I've come upstairs because there's better light and I need to do quite a bit of unpicking. So before I get into that, I will quickly show you how far I've come on the dress. So I've got the front gathered bits sewn into the front as well as the back, and then I've joined at the shoulders. I haven't joined at the side seams because once you have joined at the shoulders, the next bit is to do the facing, which goes all the way around, obviously, and there's a V-neck on both the front and the back. So one of the biggest pet peeves that I have with Big Four pattern companies is that the instructions are not very good. They're not very detailed, and often there will be a short directive, like do this step, and then there will be a postage stamp sized illustration, and that's it. Do it, figure it out. I went into this pattern just from looking at it and looking at the pattern pieces, thinking it was going to be quite simple. And honestly, it's been pretty frustrating. And I think in ways that could have been avoided. So one of my biggest points of frustration so far has been inserting these gathered bits into the front and the back dress pieces. So you're not only joining it here, but also down here. So it's like a big rectangle. The top is gathered. You have to sew a 90-degree angle and then join this part as well, which sounds pretty straightforward, but honestly, the way that they have you do it was really frustrating. And I can try and put a picture here of what they tell you to do. But basically you have this like T-shaped piece for the front and the back where you're inserting those gathered bits into like the holes. And before you do that, they have you clip the corners. Now, when sewing a right angle, which I've done many a time, typically you sew it and then for ease of moving things around, then you clip the corner. I don't know why I wasn't questioning this, but before you do the gathering and the inserting of those gathered panels, it has you clip the corners. Why is this frustrating? Well, because the way that you end up inserting the long rectangle that's gathered at the top to the dress, that corner of the dress having already been clipped, it's really difficult to get that right angle sewn in a clean way where the corner that has been clipped attaches to the corner. I don't know how to explain it except to say I had to do it a few times. It was very frustrating. Things were slipping around. There would be a little gap at the corner because it was already clipped, or there was a part where I had to redo a little bit with hand stitching. Everything is in now. As far as the gathered panels, I was able to do it in a way that I'm satisfied with. It's not perfect. The gathers aren't like evenly spaced. That was really fussy to do at the same time as trying to hit that corner. And you had to do it 4 times. So unfortunately, I started with the front. And the front and the back instructions are the same. I should have started with the back. So this is the front, and then this is the back. I think the back looks better because I had done it a couple times before. So I've done it 4 times now. And then, as I said, the next step is to do the shoulders and the facing. My biggest pain point with this pattern so far has been the instructions for doing the facing. I have sewn many a facing, not as many with V-necks, but in general, like I'm familiar with how to do a facing. And I was very confused by the very minimal instructions, and I did it the way they told me to do it, and it didn't work. So I unpicked it and I looked at it and I thought, well, it must be this way then. So I did it the way that logically my brain said made sense, still using the basic construction that they recommend, but I tried again and it still didn't work. So then I thought, okay, logically, when you do a facing, and I wish I had something I could illustrate with, but I'll just try with my hands, right? So let's say this is your piece of raw fabric, this is your neckline, and this is your facing piece. Typically, the raw edges being here, right sides together, you sew them together, and then you flip this one to the inside. So now what's exposed, or not exposed, but now what is left is a finished edge, right? As opposed to the raw edge. That's the whole point of a facing. The way that they have you sew it does not do that. You end up with the raw edge after you've sewn it and flipped it to the inside. The illustration shows it that way, the instructions explain it that way, and then it just says to lap the edges and like top stitch and you're done. And it's like, well, hang on, there's a raw seam exposed. That doesn't make any sense. That's not how you sew a facing. So I did it the way that logically made sense to me, and it still wasn't working. And again, I really regret having already clipped the corners of the V-neck of the neckline because it just made everything fiddly. I had to unpick multiple times. Things are stretching in ways they shouldn't. And so then I thought, okay, I'm just going to use the 2 facing pieces that they provided, and I'm going to use them as bias binding. I know how to do a bias binding, right? And so I basically joined the 2 facing pieces into one long piece of binding. They're both already cut on the bias, the facings were. And the seam allowance, like, it worked, theoretically. However, because the neckline has 2 V-necks, the way that I sewed the bias binding on, and mind you, this was like my 3rd or 4th attempt at getting the neckline done, I didn't accommodate for the V-neck. I should have left a little bit of space to kind of like, what is it called, miter that corner, or like do a little dart so that the V-neck sat cleanly. And I honestly think I was just tired and frustrated, and I didn't think to do that. So what I have now is a neckline with the beginning of a bias binding, right? Like, I've sewn the facing pieces that I joined together to make the bias binding. I've attached that to the V-neck of the dress with the 5/8 seam that I have to stick to that seam because I've already clipped the corners. If that hadn't have been the case, I could do like a 1/4 inch binding, but because the V-necks have already been snipped at that 5/8 seam allowance, I have to have the binding initial sew at least that deep, which is kind of frustrating. So I did that, and then I went to flip the binding to the inside, and it looks great until you get to the V-neck, because I didn't accommodate for that extra fabric that you kind of have to pinch out in a triangular shape. So the V-neck is not going to be a clean V. The binding is going to kind of ruin the V-neck and make it like a puckery curve, which is so frustrating. And I tried to look up videos of how to like fix this without redoing it because I've unpicked it so many times. People said to try sewing a dart. I did that. There's not enough fabric there. Again, the whole mitered corner V-neck binding, you need a little bit of extra fabric to make it work. And I'd already trimmed the neck is completely bound, like almost, right? So in order to redo it, I need to cut more fabric because this piece of binding that I created from sewing the 2 facing pieces together doesn't have enough fabric to accommodate what I need to do with the 2 corners to have a clean V-neck. And I don't know, if I had stopped working on this when the facing pieces weren't working and like took a day and thought about it, I would have known logically, and I would have cut new fabric for the bias binding, which is what I'm gonna have to do. I would have made it long enough to accommodate the little mitered corner or dart, whichever way you go, at the V-neck points. And it's just frustrating because I was like really cruising. I had gotten through the gathering issues, and it's also frustrating because those V-necks have already been clipped, and I can try to show you what I mean here. So this is the V-neck, and I've already clipped down to the line of stitching, and I was hoping to just be able to bind it, but as you can see, that's not the front of the V. It just wouldn't look good. It would be like puckery and kind of curved weird, and I thought about just doing it and trying to fix it with top stitching, but I don't think that's the solution. I think if I just kind of barreled through it, I would be unhappy with how it looked and I wouldn't wear it. And I'm already so frustrated by the sewing process. So I do think I need to take it off again. And I think I need to measure the circumference, including a little bit of extra for each of those V-neck points. I need to make sure that the bias tape that I'm cutting out really does accommodate a 5/8 of an inch seam on that initial attachment. Normally bias binding is like a 1/4 inch or 3/8 or something, but I need to make it wide enough where I can have the 5/8 inch seam because the fabric's already clipped. And I need to be careful when I take it off and put it back on that that clipped bit doesn't get bigger. So after I get that done, I think it will be, smooth sailing. I just have to attach the sleeves And the way that the dress is constructed, you attach the sleeves at the shoulder and then you sew the underarm and side seam all at once, and then you just hem it and hem the sleeves and hem the bottom. So I was really upset yesterday and I just walked away from it, and I think I have to unpick the facing slash kind of attempt at binding the neckline, and I need to cut new bias binding pieces from, thankfully I have fabric left over. You could use pre-made bias tape, but again, I don't have any that has a 5/8 depth of that first, fold. Typically bias binding, it's like a 1/4 inch, like I said. So yeah, really frustrating. But I'm gonna sit down and like put a show on and unpick it, and then measure twice, cut once on the amount of fabric I need to bind it, and do it the right way at the V-neck so the points are sharp and clean. And yeah, I don't know. It's not an overly complex dress. Like when you look at the pieces, if I were to have not followed the instructions, honestly, I think I would have gotten a cleaner result, because I would have gathered those rectangles first and attached them at that like 90-degree angle. I would have just gathered it, sewn everything, and then clipped the corners and finished the seams. Also, big 4 patterns never tell you when to finish seams. So they're like, I know that I need to do them, but sometimes the time, like when you do them, can matter. For instance, if they want you to have a seam pressed open, you would need to know to finish the edges before you sew it together. And if you don't know that, you would just sew them together and finish it as one and like press it towards the back or the front or whatever the situation is. But sometimes the way the pattern is constructed, it needed to be pressed open, and there's just not, they don't tell you what you need to know. So I hope that I like the result of this dress. I hope that it's worthwhile. I should have known going into it, because I've tried to make big 4 patterns before and been really disappointed by the instructions. I should have known to question. And that's the advice that I would give you. If you've sewn a lot, I've sewn a lot of clothing, question every step. Read the instructions, like read what's coming next. Read, is the seam going to be pressed open? Do I need to finish the fabric first? Things like the clipping of the corners. It told you to do that. Like the first step was to clip the corners. Just sew it first and then clip the corners. I don't know. And the neck facing instructions, I've read probably 10 times. Absolutely baffled. No idea why or what they want from that, how they think that's going to work out. I can try to show you a picture. It makes no sense to me. And I've done a lot of facings. So I'm going to finish it. I'm going to unpick everything around the neck and hope it doesn't fall apart, because I've done so many times. And yeah, maybe the next time I talk to you, I will be in a better headspace. Hopefully I will have fixed it. Maybe I will have even finished it. I don't have a ton of time. I have about an hour and a half. So I'm hoping in that hour and a half, I can do the neck facing at least. And then I can easily sew on the sleeves and hem it at a different time. But my goal for today is to just do the neck facing. So wish me luck. Okay, everyone, here is the final review of my Vogue Rachel Comey V1799 dress. As you can see, I did power through. I was able to finish it. I will say that just going rogue, ignoring the pattern instructions, and doing what I thought was best was ultimately the best decision. If I had started from the beginning and just disregarded the pattern instructions and intuitively sewed all of the pieces together in the way that I thought they should be sewn together, I think I would have been saved quite a bit of headache. However, I am pleased that I finished it. I am pleased with the result. I think the fit is really nice and loose and relaxed without being too big. I think sizing down was the right choice. The shoulders are staying put. They're not sliding off. That V-neck isn't too wide. And I really am pleased with it. I was a little bit afraid of the fabric color initially. I shared that with you guys. I think it's absolutely fine. It's different enough from my skin tone to not completely wash me out. I think it's totally fine. I do think making a navy blue or a black poplin version would be a lot of fun, and that might be something that I do in the future. But for now, I'm very pleased with the result. And if anything, let's be thankful for indie sewing patterns with good instructions. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you're all doing really well, and I will chat with you in the next one very soon.